Welcome everyone to Psyched, and every Wednesday, joining me with Andrea Chu, the two of us, we talk about things that are psychologically related. We talk about experiments. We talk about how it applies to the workplace. Andrea, welcome to the show. And Andrea, we have an exciting episode today. This is Tech Week in Malaysia. I think Malaysia, the MDEC is celebrating Tech Week, and we likewise have decided to go technology on site, right? What are we talking about?
We're going to have an exciting segment with a superstar guest with us, but we'll mention him a bit later. But we're going to talk about the joys and perils of technology. I'm pretty sure those in Malaysia, I'm not sure whether you have the same thing. During high school, we will write this in our BM Karangan in Malay, right? The bad and the good of digital technology and who is fighting against what and what it does. But we're going to take a step further and dig a little bit deeper on the responsibility of people who actually design these tech.
So that's social dilemma, and you know, I think a quick question to all of you watching out there. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the social dilemma, but how many of you get ads on things on your phone or devices after you talk about it? Say, you know, I feel like going for a holiday in Bali, and boom, within a few minutes, all around you, it's like ads for Bali, and you know, and you can ask, oh, I feel like, you know, time to get some new underwear or something, and then boom, you know, it's like all the ads.
Now we know what Roshan talks about.
But it's very interesting, right? Because social dilemma, essentially, it tells you a story is that we are what we see, and ultimately the algorithms that are feeding us is what we become. And a lot of the polarization, a lot of, at least this is what they allude to in the social dilemma, is a lot of human behavior today, especially the polarization, right? I love this, I love Trump, I'm a Biden, I'm this, I'm that, and so on and so forth. Is triggered by a lot of the polarization and that is created by a lot of these things in social media, and you know, I see a couple of comments coming in. You know, Esther says this documentary sends chills, and Sam who says algorithms, huh? and we're going to talk to an algorithm expert in a bit. But what are your thoughts? I mean, you've seen Social Dilemma, right, Andrea?
Yeah, I have.
Your quick thoughts?
We had a very quick discussion and debate about it and stuff like that with Roshan right before the MCO hit, and there was a fun, exciting debate in the office. But yeah, I think one of the key quotes I've heard before is that the reality that you have is what you see on your phone, what you see and consume, the media that you consume. And it's very interesting. But a lot of people don't know that these algorithms are being set to keep getting some kind of response from a consumer. And that's where technology comes into place. Where does the responsibility lie, right? And when you watch this documentary, I think it's on Netflix and other few streaming places, they mentioned something. People who actually work with Facebook, with Google and all these things, they say that sometimes it is because they are chasing these numbers that responsibility then begins to dilute. And that polarization happens. I think we can pull up a very quick diagram. What group polarization means is that it's basically an extension of groupthink, right? When you are in a group of people who have the same kind of mindset or opinion, then it becomes strengthened and enhanced. And then you'll see very extreme ends of whether you are supporting the right wing, the left wing, or even like things like people should be speaking out about things, people shouldn't be speaking about things. And you see this happen a lot, right? You go on Facebook, on Instagram, you see Twitter threads, people commenting, and you can see a very, very extreme opinion on two sides of things. And that's how it works with technology. And today we have somebody who's an expert in designing digital technology and digital applications and stuff like that. And he will share a bit more about how do you then decide.
Yeah,
right.
And just before we get Sashe, you know, on, you know, we've got a couple with another. Sashe says hasn't happened yet, but I googled the founder of a company once, and then the next time I was on YouTube, I saw his ad. So I see some comments coming in. I've become more cautious using social media after watching the documentary. So I mean, for those of you out there, we would love to hear from you. You know, if you feel has social media really been manipulating your behavior for profit? Is there examples you have in your life? And you know, just to push it out there, technology's role in society and how we are fed what we consume. I mean, if you have any thoughts, we would love to have your comments in the discussion section, and we will have you as part of our discussion. But you know, Andrea, you talked about polarization, and you know, maybe after this we bring our guest on, Sashe Kanapathi, and I'd love to talk about couple of experiments, right? I mean, the robbers cave experiment is a great experiment on polarization that has happened. So for all of you join our discussion, we're talking about the perils of digital technology. You want to share a little bit on who we have, Andrea, and introduce our guests?
All right, so we have Sashe Kanapathi, and he's somebody who has been in Leaderonomics Digital. He's the head over there, and he has designed with their product team with many products that helps with employee engagement, like Budaya, learning application and experience, Nicole, and a few more others like mentoring, Mentor Cloud, and stuff like that. And it's amazing to hear some of his thoughts, because that's where we are mostly the consumer. We want to hear a bit more about the designers, right? The product development teams. So welcome, Sashe, and we're so excited to have you on board.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very interesting topic. Yeah.
And Sashe, just to kick it off, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the perils of digital technology. I mean, being a digital man, what are your thoughts on the downside of it?
So it's an interesting topic for me to shed light on, because I when I was invited to come on the show, I was thinking, what stance should I take, right? Maybe I should defend technology, since I know everybody else is going to be bashing technology, right? Maybe I should be defending it. But it kind of in line with what I always think, right? So this question of is social media or technology taking advantage of human behavior for profit? My question is, isn't that what marketing does? Doesn't marketing take advantage of consumer behavior for profit, right? So we've always been in this world where corporations take advantage of consumer behavior for profit, right? That's what companies do. Companies, by definition, are for profit. And when they attempt to sell or influence you to sell, it is an influence for profit, right? Now, technology has just made it a lot more powerful. So technology is a tool, right? That made something that we were trying to do always, and has now made it a lot more powerful because of, AI engines, the prolific, nature of usage, the reach is unbelievable, right? So I would say technology is a tool. It can be used for good or evil, right? At the same time, you look at things like the Arab Spring, uprising and things like that. That was also enabled by technology. So my take is really, it is a tool that's going to accelerate and exaggerate everything that you're going to do. And so it is dangerous. And that's why I think a lot of governments and lawmakers are coming down on it and say, listen, we've got to kind of, put a ring fence around this, because they understand the power of it.
So Sam sort of agrees with you. He says good point is all around us. But let me just share a little bit on some of the data, right? So we see a sudden increase in the rates of depression, anxiety, and self-harm, especially girls, in studies done in the US and the UK around 2012 and 2013. And what was interesting is it was not so high in boys. And what they found out, again, I'll walk you through some of the research, is huge mental health issues when they were dealing specifically with social media, not so much with gaming, not so much with screen time. So screen time in itself was not a big issue, but social media, and again, this is where the polarization, and this is where some of the things that the Social Dilemma documentary talks a little bit about the perils, right? So while on one side, gaming, doesn't, there is some incremental, but really in the scheme of things, it doesn't justify condemning gaming or YouTube or screen time. But when it comes to social media, especially girls, because of the issues, and this is not just, and there's another argument that says, it's like sugar, because you can have a bit of it, but too much will be bad for you. But what they found, especially with children, is that it wasn't like sugar, meaning the kids who were not consuming social media, they were also equally affected, because they're not part of the club. And because they were not part of the club, over time they were forced to be part of the club. And if they were not, they were ostracized. So it was a huge repercussions when it comes specifically to social media, specifically when it comes to perils of social media. Your thoughts on that, Sashe?
Yeah, so I think like we said, right, it's got to be governed, right? Parents need to pay attention, and there's no rules around this. There's no, this is too much, this is too little, right? But parents need to be aware that this has great potential for harm, but also has great potential for good. I'll tell you, there are other stories that are not often shared. So, for example, people who feel lonely or introverts or shy or ostracized, and maybe they have a hobby that's really weird, right? Or maybe they collect snails or something, I don't know, right? But because of social media, they actually find like-minded people all around the world, and they feel a sense of belonging because of social media, and they feel better. And there's some positive aspects to it. So like I said, it's a tool, right? It can be good for bad. Unfortunately, it's more bad than good right now. And that's why we need to govern it and use it. But I think one of the things...
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So one of the things that you talked about is groupthink. And I think that is where a lot of the dangers come in. And I really like this quote by Einstein. Sashe, if you can put that up. I don't know the exact quote, but it's about, if everybody's thinking the same, then we're not thinking at all, right? Yeah, thanks. So this is the quote, right, that I really, really like. And I think this should govern how we look at social media, particularly as one aspect of technology. There's many aspects of technology, but I see a lot of groupthink online. What do you guys think? This, to me, is the biggest problem.
So let's talk a little bit about groupthink, and I think one of the best experiments is probably the Robbers Cave experiment. For those who don't know, there was a psychologist, Muzaffar Sharif, who actually brought together a group of boys to go camping in the early 50s, and he put them in two different sort of camps. And after a period of time, they were so attached that they when they brought them together, the two camps, they started to war with each other, even though they really were the same type, same mold, same sort of backgrounds and everything. So it's nothing to do with anything. It's just the fact that they were given activities to mold them together and say, I'm eagles and you're dogs, or whatever the groups were called. I can't remember what they were at that point in time. But just because of that ability to create some form of polarization, there was this huge war that was ensued. And Sashe, you talk a little bit about that. How do we address this issue of polarization? Because it's a great tactic, right? I mean, if you look at it, even our country today, waiting for a new prime minister. I mean, polarization is huge, right? It's this camp and that camp, and there's no gray area, right? It's black and white, and we don't know which is black and which is white anymore. How do you address this issue in technology?
So two things. I think the second part of that experiment is they did try to bring the groups together, and they found that just additional bonding or additional spending time didn't work, right? And the only thing that worked was finding a common goal that they both could rally around, right? So some of the greatest examples in our country is, for example, sports, right? You'll see communities rally around sports, right? Because we can all support the same sports team or the sports hero. So we need common goals as a group to come together. So again, like I said, all these things we know before, right? These are long ago experiments. Social behavior has been the same. Technology has exaggerated it. So we need to then be careful in how we deploy it, right? So I wouldn't blame the technology. It's blamed on how we use it and how we do things. So from an individual basis, right? This is my question to the audience, whoever's listening or watching, right? How often... So Andrea and Roshan, you asked the question, when you talk about something, that's what appears on your feed, right? And that is a big problem, because what happens, like, let's say you're on Instagram, right? Let's say you are a big fan of, I don't know, fashion design, right? And what Instagram's algorithm will do is it'll keep popping up content around fashion design. And then let's say you only like fashion design from Asia, you like that kind of style. It'll keep popping up content around fashion design in Asia. And so what happens? Your worldview becomes narrow. You never get exposed to alternative fashion trends because your algorithm starts, it's a vicious reinforcement loop, right? And so you get into worst and worst groupthink. So as individuals, we now need to be educated and aware to say, I need to proactively go and seek out content that is outside my narrow worldview. I need to find opposing content. I need to just randomly read content so that I get bombarded with more stuff. I think this is something individuals can do to overcome some of these algorithms. But then, of course, we get into this vicious loop where, I see a lot of people at night, I guess you call it doom scrolling, right? But you notice that you doom scroll more and more of the same stuff, right? Different content creators of the same content. And you just keep going and going and going. And that's when I think people are, sorry to say it, I think people are getting more dumb that way, right? Because we're not exposed.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have
so I mean, this is part of what the social dilemma talked a little bit about, right? I mean, before I get there, quick comments from somebody who collects snails. Once I put salt on one of them and it died, and I felt guilty to this day. So this is a snail murderer right there. And I guess to your question, many of these is designed, right? Because you like this content is designed to keep you on the app longer, right? So
It's
I mean
not-
that brings a question, right? Should tech companies be held responsible for these conflicts and polarizations and divide? I mean, because there is no accountability, right? Like you said, it's free for all, right? At this point in time, right? It's the Wild Wild West, right? In the world of technology, how do we? I mean, we say parents need to be better at this, but if you in a situation where the kid will get really, really upset with the parent because everybody else in the class is on Insta and I'm not, because my parents don't allow me. I mean, there's a lot of issues, right? How do so? I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, really, it's a very, very tough situation to be in, right? It's in a no
you see
wins.
this playing out. You see this playing out today in the U.S. a lot. It's very publicized legal battles, and governments calling tech companies to task and making them explain themselves. But yes, I would say yes. I mean, if you wield power, and tech companies do wield power, you have a societal responsibility to wield that power correctly. I think that, right? That's more ingrained in my values and philosophy of life. But I think, ultimately, I love this chart. I wish I brought it, but I don't have this chart. But, technology grows at an infinite pace, right? It is constantly changing. And individuals adopt technology first, right? They're the fastest because as an individual, you're more agile and you're able to quickly pick up something, right? Like TikTok, right? Individuals pick it up. And then eventually companies will follow. When companies see that individuals are gravitating towards the space, then companies will follow behind. There's a lag, right? And then after that, governments come behind them, right? When companies start adopting, then governments are like, oh, wait, I got to watch this. I got to control this, right? And then regulations come in and things like that. So there's always this lag. It affects individuals positively or negatively. Then it'll start affecting companies, and companies will start taking advantage of it, which then can be bad or good for an economy or country. Then countries will come behind and say, let me regulate this and put controls over this. It's what happened with, let's say, marijuana in the US, right? Drugs, right? It's always that way. There's this lag. There's this thing that comes up, right? So I think governments now are paying more attention, and I think they should. It's a powerful tool. It's like nuclear weapon, right? You need rules and regulations around it, I think. It's like AI. They're going to need that eventually.
So Sashe, I think one of the things you brought up is there's a joy, right? I mean, technology has also helped us with interactions, to efficiency, execution. So much of progress and productivity has been driven by that. But and here's where I'm wondering. I mean, one of the things is I don't think a Facebook or an Insta or any of them will change because the business model is such, right? And they will fight regulations and they have the money to fight it. Or fight responsibility because it's a very nice space to be. So ultimately, like you said, the adoption, it starts with an individual. So should individuals start to gravitate and say, look, I want the good stuff, the efficiency, the interactions, the learning, all that stuff. Does that mean at some point in time, you'll see closed and what we call paid social media, where I'm paying a subscription to be part of a club, like say, and I think that's what you guys are doing at Nicole also, right? Where more and more communities will be gravitated towards closed, paid, safe havens rather than open, free, where you are the product. Ultimately, when it's free, you know that you and the data are your products. Do you foresee that happening so that the joy pieces of technology can continue? And the folks that create those technology can be funded in a very different way. Obviously, the monetary compensation will be much more different because the exponential, where advertising dollars, you can exponentially grow it. The margins are going to be huge on the free social media page like Facebook. The closed one is a subscription-based one, but you get the freedom of knowing that you won't be polarized. And the likelihood of you going into groupthink will be much less. Do you think that's what will be happening over the next 5-10 years?
Yes and no. So firstly, before I answer your question, Roshan, I think we need to firstly make a statement that says, whether tech is good or bad and whether social media is good or bad is two different conversations, right? So I don't want to, first of all, just group social media as the only, manifestation of tech, right? There's a lot of other tech that's around, collaboration tools, AI tools, things like that, right? Medical health, tech and things like that. Okay, so that's the first caveat I'm going to say. The second caveat I'm going to say is that having a group, a paid group or not a paid group, still puts you at risk of groupthink, right? because you're still getting like-minded people to in a group. And then it's even worse if it's closed by a paywall, because then you're more likely not being able to expose. But having said that, I think a paid curation service is very valuable. So you're not trying to be a private group for the sake of being a private group, but what you're saying is, I don't trust the algorithms to give me the right news or the right feed or a fair, unbiased feed. But what I need is experts who are going to curate that feed for me. So I will pay for a curation service. And if that's in a private group, that's great, because people who are more aware and who are more exposed will then be able to give you fair, unbiased information for you to then evaluate and consume. Because if you just trust the algorithms are just going to reinforce what you already know. You're never going to learn. You're never going to be challenged. And even if you're wrong, you're going to think you're right. So you need somebody else to come in. So I think curation, an intermediary of content, is a very valuable thing in today's day and age. And that's why I think people follow experts. They are looking for somebody who's trustworthy or credible. It's what newspapers used to play a role in before, right? So now we need somebody like that online. But even online, a lot of these curation engines are biased because they're trying to use algorithms. It's not a proper, middle curation.
Oh, I think that's an absolutely important point. We still need the human curative capabilities to some extent to enable us to see that. And is that what you mean? Talk us through maybe one minute or so. Nicole.app, your app that does that, right? I mean, it's algorithms together with human curation.
Yeah,
is that accurate
exactly.
to say?
So thanks for that, allowing me to plug Nicole. So Nicole is basically, what we're doing, saying, let the AI engine do what it's good at, which is go out in a very efficient way, find all the content available based on things that we train it and bring it back. And then we continue to train it to say, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. But ultimately we have a human, right, who looks at what the AI produces and says, this is what's relevant for this people. This is what's good. This is bad. This is actually marketing. We don't want that. This is a product sale. We don't want that. This is valid content. This is outdated content. We don't want that. So all that an algorithm can't do yet, right? And I don't think it'll be able to do for a while. So we have that human layer on top of that. And then finally, the user gets something that has the power of both human curation and AI curation and gets the best of both worlds that way. So that's what Nicole does.
Fantastic. So thanks for that. We've got Sam who had a comment. You can't hide from bias. The trick is to educate yourself, be a critical consumer. Not easy for everyone. I think people like Sam, you are able to have self-awareness. I think that's key, right? Another comment, Netflix is also uses an algorithm to cater to our likes and needs. There is a very fine line between good and evil. I guess you can concur with that.
Yeah, can I jump in on that? So like Netflix,
sure.
Right? So I asked all the audience today, right? So on Netflix, do you proactively go and search for content that is outside of your genre and look for it? Don't just rely on the algorithm. So this is what you have to do as a responsible consumer on the internet today, right? You have to proactively go and seek something not being fed to you. And that's my advice.
Yeah. Or you can be a parent and like me, and then your kid kind of uses it to watch cartoons, and the teenager wants to watch his Japanese anime, and then the entire Netflix gets confused about what I like, and they have no idea. But you're right. I think that's a very important point, and thank you. I'd love to hear your comments. I mean, if anybody else has a thought on the perils or the joy of technology. And I think what Sashe made, very important point, right? And I think there's a distinction between digital technology in a whole and social media. And I think, our point was we're zooming in a little bit on social media, where there is some, at least we have research to back it up, that there is polarization. There is some form of change that is needed, and accountability that's needed for some of these tech guys. Sashe, your final thoughts for us as we wrap this segment around you, and we get back to Andrea and to take us to the next piece. Sashe, your advice and final thoughts to us. I know one advice you will say is buy Nicole, right? So for those you have not used Nicole, go to Nicole.app. That's the website, and download it. So I'll do that for you, Sashe. But your final thoughts in terms of advice or insights that you want to give us in this joys or perils of social media.
Yeah. So I think I already gave the individual advice, right? So if you're an individual, seek alternative thoughts, seek alternative content, seek experts who you can trust to curate for you. And if that's an app like Nicole, fine. But if it's somebody you trust, or you got to do that proactively. Don't get sucked into the algorithms. That's number one. Number two, for tech companies out there, I understand it's a business. I understand it's a marketing. I understand it's users, it's consumers, it's conversion to customers. That's all fine. That's fine. But at the same time, all of us are using tech, and all of us have a responsibility. So I'll leave you with my favorite Spider-Man quote: "With great power comes great responsibility."
Thank you, Ben Parker, the sage Sashe. So thanks, Sashe. I really appreciate your advice and your thoughts on this segment, and we will hopefully catch up with you on a show that's upcoming. Thanks again, Sashe. So Andrea, your quick thoughts on what you just heard from Sashe.
Cool. I think listening to Sashe and listening to some of the comments that's coming in, I think we cannot deny that there is the negative impact of not just social media but digital technology as a whole. The apps that you use, the things that people are designing right now. For example, one of the coolest things that I'm looking at is actually in psychology. There are therapists out there who are trying to design an AI function counseling system on apps and stuff like that. And the question is whether people know whether this is a good app or not is hard, because we are not in the field, right? We don't understand how these things work. So the key important thing is like the Social Dilemma documentary you watched in the beginning, it says this, right? They are designed to not let you be aware of how they design certain things. So the more you talk about it, the more you explore these thoughts and different opinions, that's how we then come out of that bubble, right? You come out of that little thing that they have created, this utopia world or dystopia world, whichever they are trying to create at that point of time. And I think one of the key things that I realized that is very important besides self-awareness and awareness of what's happening is actually critical thinking, right? We have to be very critical at what we let ourselves absorb and accept and become our narrow worldview or not. And then these are a few things that people talk about. When I'm not sure whether in STPM or in other pre-university level education that you think we learn about critical thinking, which is really funny, right? We thought that education from a very young age, we should have critical thinking, but we don't. I only learned this in A levels, and they put out all these kind of dilemmas and what they call as cognitive dissonance and distortions that people put. Yeah. And I think this is something that we can start practicing, having that level of analysis and also communicating with people and having open-mindedness is one of the key things. And I mean, you see stats that shows that people who have critical thinking skills are most not just wanted as a key skill in jobs, but also people who, generally people enjoy people who are critical thinkers. Right. So I think that's what we can leave as a key skill to learn.
Sure. And I think there's a couple more things I think that's interesting. And there's two aspects to it, right? One is you are a developer of digital products. I think that's one of the points that Sashe made, right? And I think if you are a developer of digital products, right, where does your responsibility lie? What are you thinking about? Are you serving, is it really about getting to profits at all costs, regardless of what the side effects are for the consumer or for the organization, for the nation, or for the world, right? Or is there more to it? How do you think about the development process as you design digital products, right? And as Sashe said, right, it's algorithm based. Yes, it's much more scalable, but how do you add the human element and ultimately get it right to some extent? I think that's one piece. I think the other piece is if you are a person who's buying technology, especially at the company level, right? You're buying technology for your company. How do you choose the right technology? Because technology can dictate behavior, right? Ultimately, technology is an infrastructure, right? And structure ultimately causes people to behave in a certain way, right? So how do you be clever about the sort of choices that you make for the technology that you build into your organization? A couple of quick articles that talk a little bit about technology on Leaderonomics.com. If you go to Leaderonomics.com, there's Leveraging Technology and Leadership by Sandy Clark, and you'll be able to see the links in the social media space. The rapid use of technology. Datin Badrunisa, formerly from Axiata, the head of talent and the head of HR there, writes about how to do it right, right? Using technology to engage and retain employees. You'll see that. on Leaderonomics.com also, and a couple of other articles that you'll be able to see on your social media feed. So those will be useful for you as you ponder. But I think those are very important questions that we have to ask when we buy technology, and ultimately when we build technology. If we are building technology, how are we building it so that we can build it right? Now, I want to sort of open it up again for our viewers. If you have any comments and questions that you want to ask us, this is a good time for you to ask or throw your thoughts in. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Andrea, as we wrap up this show, what are your sort of quick thoughts when it comes to this? Developing technology and essentially developing technology and using technology or purchasing technology. What are your sort of thoughts or recommendations that you would give?
I think my recommendation, I'm going to focus on people who are actually purchasing technology. I think if you are somebody who is a decision maker in the company, you are the one who decides what kind of technology or application all your employees are using. It's a huge responsibility. And this is something that I live by. Whenever I feel very strongly about something, I go and find people to fight with me about it. That's how I see whether I'm really being objective or I am having a very narrow worldview. And the more I fight with people or argue or debate, that's how I realize, actually, there's so many perspectives, right? So if you are having that decision making position, my advice, or rather my suggestion for you, is to actually go and fight with people about your thoughts, right? And the more you see what the tech company says, right? This is where marketing lies, right? They can say all they want about their mission and vision and all that. But when you look at their technology and their action points, that is the true indicator of whether they are actually marketing it to you or they actually are trying to provide value to you. I think that's very important. I mean, in Leaderonomics, that's very important to us too. Especially with our technology, we always ask okay, if we do certain things like machine learning and AI, what are some of the negative impact that can happen and how do we prevent that? So I think that's what I would say. And I like this quote that our producer pulled out by Edward Taft. He says that there are only two industries that call their customers users: illegal drugs and software. So be very careful out there, and please speak to people who are very completely different views with you and have that kind of openness to talk about it. I think that's my last thoughts on it. And we have a very exciting promo code that we want to put. This is marketing and we are trying to give you something valuable and hopefully that will be of use to you and your company. But Nicole is on sale for a 5% discount with a campaign that we're running called Make a Shift in Your Organization. So use that to check out and definitely do it for yourself or your employees. Amazing app. Yeah, so I think that's my last thoughts.
Yep. So we got a guest who says, I guess another concern of using apps in terms of privacy issues, especially from apps that didn't comply with their own privacy policies, and that's a valid point now. So I think it goes back to you as a user. So just to summarize, I mean, we're talking about digital technology, and technology itself, as I think Sashe clearly pointed out, is not evil, nor is it angelic. There is always, just like infrastructure, just riding a car in itself, doesn't kill, but a car can kill, but that doesn't mean you don't drive a car, right? So, I mean, it's, simply put, technology is such, right? You can use it for transportation, you can, just like a car and get you places, but you can also recklessly drive it in a crazy way and cause damage to yourself and to others in the process. And I think that's very similar to technology. I think that's a very important point. I think the other important point that Sashe put out is that, as a user of technology, you need to be conscious of what you're being fed. And if possible, not so much going into a closed group that is paid, but really a curated one that has both AI pushed to some extent, or what we call algorithms, but also intertwined with human intervention or human curation. And he recommends this app called Nicole, which I think is very useful. Which I think you just put a promo code out there, which I saw. So for those who want to check it out, Nicole.app is right there, and that's one. But I think the other piece is the important point is that not just as users, we need to be aware of what we are using. We need to be aware of what our children are using. We need to take as much steps as we can, although sometimes it's very tough. but we need to be very self-aware. As one of our, I think, comments from Sam that says, self-awareness is clear. You talked about critical thinking that gives us the ability to see things in a bigger picture. And I think the other piece is, as we buy and we purchase and develop apps for our organization, we need to be very conscious of the side effects that this has. And to close it out, I want to just make another call, because this show is brought to you by Budaya. We've been talking about Nicole, but one of the apps that I really enjoy is Budaya or Happily. And we'll take a quick 30-second break and check this video, and I want to come back with some closing thoughts on some of the lessons we've learned today from the session today. So here's a quick call out to Budaya, another great app that is closed, that is for your organization, to help you drive employee engagement in your company. As we close out, I always find, I love technology, right? I mean, from when I was young, I remember I even my dorm room, when I was in university, I built computers to make extra income, right? I built computers for a lot of the students in the university. Me and a Korean guy, we used to build the computers and package it and sell it at a much cheaper price than buying a Gateway at that time, and a Dell or whatever it was in retail. And we made a lot of money, and I used to use that money to buy more technology, right? So I was always enamored by technology, and I always feel technology is great, right? But I think one of the things that and to me, Budaya or if you Happily Budaya app, I just love it. It's just incredible, right? I mean, it's done so much for the organization in terms of enabling recognition to happen, enabling so many other things to happen. So I definitely would encourage any of you to check out Budaya.app and make that call. But Andrea, as we close out today, right? Your final thoughts on what I was thinking, your comment just now, right? There are only two industries that call their customer users illegal drugs and software. Or I think Sashe made that comment. And another one that popped up in my mind is, a politician should serve 2 terms. One in office and the other in prison, right? So we've seen politicians. Usually, I feel it should be the other way around. They should go to prison first, then serve office, like Nelson Mandela, right? They become much better leaders, right? So hopefully, we'll see some of our politicians who have already gone to prison, take office and in a big way in the afternoon. But let's see what happens in the country. But your final thoughts on our conversation today?
I think like I mentioned, no worries. I think at the end of the day, like we mentioned, there's 2 parts, right? Responsibility, awareness, critical thinking and stuff like that. Instilling that even in your children, your employees is key. And I think speaking about politicians and how that's happening, we're going to have an exciting episode next week where we talk about dishonesty, right? What lying is and what we call as the dark triad of personality. And we have an exciting guest, Dr. Kylie. She's from Reading University and she heads the psychology section and program lead, and she talks about forensic psychology and all these things as well. So we're going to talk about whether liars are serial killers or not, and where does that come from. So we're very excited. Do join us next week at same time, same place, LinkedIn Live, YouTube, and also Facebook. Thank you so much for watching, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrea. And we'll leave you with these thoughts. The technology is joyful, but there are some perils to it. So do take care and all the best in your journey ahead. So have a great week, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye.